Thanks, the team. Good morning, everyone. As you might see behind me, or listen to the birds, so it's not raining in Catalonia, definitely not. I mean, it's a pity that I can see the sea from here, but I cannot go take a bath. This is the bad part, but at least it's sunny outside. I would have loved to meet you all in Berlin. It would have been amazing to have this presentation face to face, but we have this opportunity to even probably cluster a larger number of participants thanks to the possibility to do it online. Jitka already introduced a little the relevance of monitoring, no? I mean, how monitoring for further evaluation is going to be, it is already, but it's going to be even more important towards the next programming period starting next year. So personally, I've been working with the Joint Research Center of the Commission for a long time now, and every time that I collaborate with them, we're putting more and more attention to this topic. No, for instance, in something very different, we just closed the project of how to implement smart specialization in Rwanda, in Africa. So that might sound very far, but just for you to see how far the smart specialization is going. And the main question that always comes in Rwanda, in Europe, everywhere is, how do we know whether the strategy is working or not? I mean, what information we need to know that this is working. So, and there's no real consensus about that. This is the first challenge that we're facing now, because what do we really want to know? We want to know if the projects that we gave funding to were the right ones. We want to know if the stakeholders are collaborating in the way they were supposed to. We want to know if the money was used efficiently, meaning cost effectiveness analysis. So all these things are different. And that's especially important for innovation policy, because I like to use an example. No, let's imagine that instead of discussing innovation, we were discussing health policy. And a government decides to introduce a new vaccination program. So I'm not going to say, so at the beginning I wanted to use the COVID example, but talk about vaccines could be tricky now. So we will talk about the new vaccine for chickenpox, for example. So that's clear. We introduce the vaccine program, and next, after a few months, we check whether it worked or not. So how many people got infected before? How many people got infected after? That is clear. We can see how much money it cost, how much money we saved to the public system, how many people got infected last year, how many people got infected this year. So all these are numbers, it's clear, and we can assess whether the program worked or not. However, let's imagine now that we are talking about a huge innovation project, and that there is a program and we invest 1 million euro in subsidies for this project. And this project is about to create a new technology, a patent for something, one technology. So after 1 year, the funding's over, the project's closing, and no technology, no patent, nothing. All the research failed, it was a disaster, nothing. So from an accountability point of view, for someone checking the cost effectiveness of this subsidy, the answer would be 0 technologies, 1 million euro of spending lost. But this is the first interesting concept. That was not spending, that was investment. So we need to assess a way in which we can be discussing whether there were other things that work. So this million is not lost. There were some interactions, there were probably maybe new projects that arose after that. Maybe there were collaborations that they were not available before and now they are. So there are externalities. There is what we will discuss as learning from there. No? So imagine that from a policymaker or someone who goes in front of a camera explaining how they're using public money. I mean, we cannot say we lost 1 million euro, but it's not so not true. I mean, this million euro was invested for different things. Just 1 second, because now I can only see my chat for some reason. And sorry, I will need maybe, okay, I'm back here, sorry. And so my presentation is about this monitoring scheme. I continue seeing my presentation. So I don't know, Marcus. Sorry, I just see the chat. Is there
Technical problem. I see the same.
I I just see the
I will
chat.
handle it for you.
I just see the chat. I don't see my presentation. Here we are. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Marcus.
And
So, when discussing this monitoring, as Jitka already introduced, is going to be a key aspect for the period 2001 2027. No, so for example, now I'm one of the experts of the Joint Research Center assessing the results of the first period of smart specialization in some regions in Europe. So, and one thing that we see is that there's no consensus, and the monitoring mechanisms are quite I mean, not very complete, and are quite simplistic and so on. No, and since there is going to be an enabling condition, I think that probably it's time just to think what we really want. And as Jitka said, it's one of the three key conditions, because we need to really know whether the strategy is working. No? To discuss about that, the first thing that I would like to introduce with my first slide is the difference that sometimes we forget about when we discuss smart specialization and when we discuss ERDF. So ERDF is a financial instrument, it's money, okay? Money that we relate to the strategy, but it's not the strategy. The strategy is a way in which we look to foster research and innovation and competitiveness in the European territories in the long run. So it's way more than that. I know even some regions that are using just a little part of ERDF for their smart specialization strategies, and the rest with their own money and so on. So let's not confuse that. That's important. Why? Because when we want to monitor the impact, the results of ERDF, that's clearer. Because all financial programs is public money. Of course, we need to see what happened exactly. So if the program was to create 10,000 new R&D job positions, then we need to see how many were created. Yes? So it's clear. Or if we wanted to enlarge the private investment in R&D by 10% compared to the previous period, we can measure that. That's clear. It's concrete programs with concrete money, with concrete objectives. However, smart specialization is like a strategy, in which this ERDF is an instrument, but the strategy is not about giving funding for projects. That's an instrument again. So smart specialization strategy wants to reshape or improve the system, the ecosystem for innovation in the European territories individually and collaborating together, as it will even get more important in the next programming period, as Jitka introduced. No? So first thing that we need to understand is that when I will be discussing monitoring, I will be only going through these objective, quantifiable indicators that we would already be using for ERDF, and I will try to go way farther. So I want to limit, of course, the expectations. It's not that I can say that they are perfect indicators, that there's perfect information, that we can have one template for the perfect monitoring system that can be applied to all regions and countries. And everyone will have to work according to their stakeholders, to their culture, to their frameworks. But it's important to introduce these further inputs. So all that I'm going to be discussing about, and I've been discussing these three axes in presentations, working with the Jitka colleagues in Brussels and other people, is that we could divide it in general terms in three axes, which I called axis 1, direct outputs, axis 2, specialization, and axis 3, learning. So, but axis 1 is what 95% of the regions that already have in place some kind of monitoring scheme for smart specialization, they're using this axis 1. Okay, so for example, the other day I was reviewing some document even for the SmartWatch project. Thank you for sharing this to me and with me. And most of the indicators, most of the information were very strong on trying to monitor this axis 1. This axis 1 is accountability. We'll discuss it in a minute. Are those quantifiable, objective indicators that we mostly use to verify, to understand what happened, to monitor what's happening with ERDF, with the instrument. And of course, you will see also the logo of Smart Specialization is because it also gives us obvious information for Smart Specialization. It's just that while ERDF can finish there, the information that we need for ERDF can finish there, the information that we need for Smart Specialization shouldn't finish there. So let's go to Access 2. It's something that we usually forget about. I'm the first person to forget about all the time, which is what happens to the actual Smart Specialization process. So at the beginning, so in 2012, 2013, some regions even 2014, through the entrepreneurial discovery process, collaborating with the stakeholders, they were selecting some specialization domains, let's call, which were a few, like for example, health industries, I don't know, tourism, the main sectors, the main activities that they thought that they had competitive advantages in, and that can be strong and excel in those domains. No, but we need to see what happened to them. I mean, let's see, did they move? Did they evolve? We need to change them. So it's something that we need to consider, no? And the third one, and probably most important, is what happens with the learning. So what is the actual long run change update of the strategy? So we close ERDF, we maybe change the specialization domains, whatever, but the strategy is something that works in the very long run. It takes time. It takes things are happening. So the idea is that the institutions are learning, the managing authorities are learning, all the stakeholders are learning. So there is change there. There is an actual change. So we want to monitor this change. So let's analyze them one by one, more or less. So again, as I said, axis one is just the traditional accountability perspective. So here there are some principles. No, it says it's based on observable criteria. So it's objective. How many people were working in R&D before the instrument or before this period and after? So we can compare. No? So, and it allows us to perform this cost-benefit analysis. Let's say we invested 1 million in this. What happened before? What happened after? Was this million well invested? We can assess that. No? So they are needed for public funding validation, of course. I mean, let's not forget, sometimes we'll discuss it later. For example, ERDF comes with lots of bureaucracy and so on. That's true, but it's public money. So we need to have indicators and we need to have information to prove that public money is used in the right way, let's say. No? So they can be easily comparable considering time and territories. So we can compare the evolution over time, and we can also compare what's happening in different territories, okay? There are mechanisms to adapt the same information across regions and countries because there might be biases and so on, but different ways, but it can be comparable. And for S3-based ERDF instruments, it's required, no? So most of these indicators, at least the most important ones, are available in this guideline of the Commission, in which we can find the monitoring and evaluation guideline for ERDF. Now, with this, we already have lots of information that it's telling us what's happening with S3. We have the baseline, how the investments changed, how the job market changed, how many technologies were created, how many startups companies, innovative startups companies were created. All this is important and it's basic. But what I'm trying to say here is that we need to go a little further. Let's go to the second axis, the one it's specialization process. It's an easy concept to understand. No, it's just like we had all these selected domains. Let's see how they evolve. No, so it says it aims at understanding the evolution of specialization domains and make choices over them. So now, towards the next programming period, it's something that we will have to reassess. What happened with the selected priorities that we chose in the past, 7 years ago, and what do we do now? We need to modify them, we need to change them. How did they evolve? What happened there? No? So the first thing is that they should not be seen as immobile. They must be flexible. So when we consider health industries, so probably the answer, if I ask you what's health industries, the general answer 20 years ago is probably not the same that you would provide now. So, but probably it's not going to be exactly the same question that you would have answered 7 years ago. So we need to see how this is evolving. What does exactly mean now? So we need to be able to understand, no? we must be able to measure the emerging industries. So 7 years ago, there were activities, products, services, concrete activities, sectors, subsectors, let's say, that they didn't exist. So they're new. It's what innovation is about. So we need to make sure that we understand what's happening there. So are there new emerging activities, and can we really include them in just one of the selected domains, or are they merging somehow? We need to consider this possibility too. No? We also need to assess the role of the key enabling technologies because they're evolving too. So ICTs, they're evolving. So we see the importance of ICTs these days, but we can also discuss biotechnology, nanotechnology, robotics, and so on. So how these key enabling technologies are supporting this change in the different specialization domains. What's happening there? And the problem, it's not a problem, but it's a challenge, is that we need real expertise when considering that, no? Because when we were comparing the level of investment before and after, so if we have good statistics, we can just compare that. Any one of us can do it. But if we want to assess whether these emerging activities are relevant, less relevant, what's happening there, probably we need some experts. So we cannot, so none of us probably knows about everything. So we need this extra support. So this is, so in the discussions that we'll have later, this is one of the things for which we will have to think indicators for. So how can we measure this evolution in the different specialization domains? What information we would need to adapt them to see what's happening, to see if there are new activities. So what's happening there? Let's have information on how this is evolving. And now we go to, for what I think is the most important one, and I will devote some time here, which is this learning dynamics. So what's happening? What are we really learning? So learning understood as a structural, long-term change in the ecosystem, in the innovation system in our regions and countries. So what do we understand by learning? So let's say that we can understand two main things, and they all add up. So the first one is the learning in policy making. No? So some of you are representatives from managing authorities. So I'm sure that you learned a lot throughout these last 7 years on different things about how to manage innovation. So you learned probably about managing different instruments. Probably you learn more about how to collaborate with stakeholders that you never knew that even existed. Maybe you learn even about concrete innovation topics that you didn't have to interact with in the past. So you're learning from that. So that's a large learning. So I'm sure that all the managing authorities that I've discussed with, and I've discussed with a few managing authorities in Europe, so they're all pretty convinced that they learned a lot through this period. So that's good because that updates, that improves the innovation system when the managing authorities, when the public authorities have a better understanding. No? And of course, the beneficiaries, people who received not only money, but support, collaboration, whatever, from the different initiatives that were linked to S3. No? So learning, so the beneficiary institutions learned. Okay, so they learn how to, for example, with collaborating with other institutions, they learn how to develop their research, how to tackle new projects, how to provide capacity building to the employees. But they also generated positive externalities because they were learning, but they were also sharing their knowledge. So it's the will. So if you put all this together, it's building up into an improvement of the ecosystem of the whole innovation process. So this is what we understand. We have this policy mix from S3. In this policy mix, of course, we include ERDF, but any other thing. So as I told you, some regions are not just using ERDF, they're using their own funds and many other things, and they are aligning to the S3. And that generates outputs. Some of them work, some, like as I told you before, maybe we have a new technology, maybe we don't. But whatever happens with this output, in the meanwhile, we are learning from the project implementation. We're generating these externalities, these learning externalities. So whether the objective of the project was achieved or not achieved, in the meanwhile, many things happened. And probably, that should be even included here, after the project finishes, things will happen. For example, some stakeholders, some institutions that never participated in any R&D project before. Now, thanks to the policy mix links to S3, they participated in one, and now they want to continue participating in the future. So we can say that without the strategy, this wouldn't have happened, and now it's going to happen. Okay? So of course, if we just measure accountability, we will know nothing about that. We will know nothing. We will know the technology was created or not, new employment was created or not, more investment was there or not. But why don't we ask ourselves, what happens in the future? No, is it sustainable? So let's discuss 3-4 sources for learning measurement. So just to be a little more pragmatic. So the first one is the monitoring of the policy making process. As I told you, like those of you who are managing authorities, I'm quite sure that 99% of you could say that you are learning about innovation policy, that you improved your skills, that you improved your knowledge about the ecosystem, that you know more about how to deal with all this in the future. So it's important, and what we can see, it's important to monitor this as this evolution, because we know it in an abstract way. All of you could say, yes, we know more, but let's monitor this. Let's see, you know more about what? I mean, let's compare it with other regions, even with your colleagues, no? So first, it's important to identify these learning priorities. What is important for policymakers to learn? So it's very important for those that are less experienced to know how to deal with funding, maybe. Some of those of you who have been dealing with funding for a very long time, maybe it's more important to understand the idiosyncrasy of stakeholders. So what do we really want to learn, no? And define some indicators and the information that it's good to collect also from a public point of view to understand the change of the public system. So, and this information must be collected in a structured manner. So there can be many ways, from focus group to concrete indicators, whatever, in which policymakers can interact and see, okay, let's see what we're learning and see what we have improved and see what questions we don't have answers for, and so on, no? And it's important to engage different units and managing bodies. That means that, for example, in Catalonia, it's a very large government, so the smart specialization instruments, mostly, not only, but mostly linked to ERDF, are managed by very, very different bodies. So agencies, departments, and so on. So it's important to coordinate those bodies, to coordinate this information. Otherwise, it's just still same as before. Different bodies managing their own instruments and not sharing the learning. So it's important to continue that. So second, let's talk about the beneficiaries. So we need more information about them. We just don't want to know if they created a new company, or if they have a new technology, or if they're now employing 2 extra researchers, or if they're spending 10% more. That's good, but that's not enough, because we want to see the structural change for these beneficiaries, how they evolve in the long run. So we want to know, we can ask them questions, okay, like for example, about interviews, focus group with the stakeholders, not just to know the exact, concrete, quantifiable results, but go farther than that, no? To see, to ask questions about why they chose to do this project and not another one. Why did they plan it the way they did? Why they executed the way they did? Why did they learn while they're doing the execution? What do they think about their own results? If they fail, why do they think they failed? And what will they do in the future they will continue working on that? And if they succeeded, are they interested in continuing these research lines? So what's the impact in the firm? Are they changing their inner structure to make sure that more innovation activities are included? So what are they doing there? And what about the partnership? Why did they choose to work with these other institutions? Will you continue working with them in the future? Are they thinking about working with other institutions that they didn't work in the past? So all these questions will give us information about how the system is evolved. ERDF is not monitoring that. And most of the indicators that I've seen in S3 systems already existent are not monitoring that. But I think it's very important to see how the strategy is generating this long-term change. Another thing is, for example, the use of big data. Now, it's not only, it's a support mechanism, but it will give us information. It can give us information about patterns, trends, what's happening. No, it can give us information about investment in different sectors. For example, if we have a tool that gives us information about all the different funds they are interacting, the collaboration among partners, and so on. Now, for example, and sorry that I'll be talking a few times about my homeland, but it's the example that I know the best, obviously. So in Catalonia, we have also a tool in which when we can monitor every single Catalan stakeholder who participates in innovation projects. We can see the people, the other institutions with whom they interact, in what kind of funds they are accessing to, in what topic these projects are. So we try to see all these networks because we learn things like, are they always collaborating with the same stakeholders? Are they changing? Are they working in more than one sector? So we learn things from that, no? And also, which is very important, and it's becoming more and more important, is the direct participation in concrete initiatives, no? So that means that, for example, public authorities, some of you, are getting more and more involved in directly participating from the projects and the initiatives, like saying, being another partner, an extra partner of a partnership, or participating in some meetings, or assessing the evolution before the project's finished. So, and enlarge this collaboration with the stakeholders. First, understand what information we want to get from them. And then through this collaboration, we're learning more about what's happening. So what technologies are being discussed, what are the real challenges of the society. So for example, there's these ideas labs, no, in which stakeholders representing the triple or quadruple helix model, they gather in the same place and they discuss one challenge and they propose solutions and so on. So the public system can be there. So, and above all, this needs to be dynamic. So that means that this system must be always changing, always adapting. So that means that if some indicator, some information is not working, it's not working like this, maybe we should make it work like that. Or if this information is not useful, maybe we need to change it. So we shouldn't see it as something that we decide in 2020 and must be lasting exactly until 2030. So we must be open to introduce change. So this comes with challenges, obviously. The first challenge is this dynamic logic is puzzling. No, it's not easy to understand, especially from a policy making point of view, that indicators and information might be changing over time. Now we're collecting information about this, but tomorrow maybe we need to collect more information about that. So this dynamism is a challenge. Okay, it's not easy, but we must think in ways to incorporate these possibilities. No, the second is that it's difficult to quantify than quantifiable. That means that if we want to, learning is not something that we can measure from 1 to 10. So just to use one word. So if we want to see change in the ecosystem, it's nothing that we can say 20% change. I mean, it's difficult. So it's nothing that we can easily do. We love quantities because they let us compare, but we need to find ways to measure these indicators, but in a way in which we understand that quantities might be challenging. The third one is subjectivity. Okay, subjectivity means that there are not clear indicators sometimes. The inner word is learning, this change. These are not perfect. Many of you will understand it in different ways. No, so it's not a perfect concept. So how do we transform something that is subjective into something objective? So it's possible, but we need to reflect on that. No. And that also means that, for example, when we read these indicators, different people might read in a different way. So if I ask you, all of you, what do you understand by learning, you will give me very different questions, different answers. So that means that we must have some consensus when reading these results. And finally, how can we measure this learning additionality? What's additionality? So additionality means that so if we want to see, if we give subsidies to 10 companies and we don't give subsidies to another 10 companies, we can compare the results of the first 10 and the latter 10 and see the first 10 did better. So that means that the instrument worked. But when we measure learning, can we compare? We compare with whom? with the institutions that did not receive any funding, but what if they learn through other ways or through externalities? So it's also a challenge. And now, yes, finally, these RDF. So I said friend and foe. So Fred, yes, of course, it's perfect, it's great, and it's important to have all this huge amount of funding to implement the projects under the strategy. But they also come with some restrictions. No, remember that ERDF was designed originally for some other purposes. So they come with it's not an easy fund to manage when it comes to innovation, and it comes with bureaucracy and so on. No, for example, just to have an example, here in Catalonia, when the managing authority decided just to try to ask for more information about the beneficiaries, just to try to tackle these learnings. So at the beginning, we designed some questionnaires and some focus groups and so on, but we had to stop that pilot action because we were seeing that we were asking already too much information from the bureaucracy required for ERDF, that we were not in position to continue asking even more information. So we also need to deal with this challenge. So summarizing, and we will discuss this topic in two of the four parallel discussions that we'll have next. You guys will be discussing about what indicators, what information, what can we discuss about that, no? So they must allow this flexibility, this dynamism, but of course further debate is needed. So we need to understand that there is nothing that we can introduce in an overnight, like saying we have nothing now and tomorrow we have everything, we have the perfect system. No, it's a gradual process. We introduce some new indicators, we see if they work, maybe we can access some information now, and maybe in 2 years we can access some extra information. So it's an evolving, it's a learning by doing process. So a little annex is about internationalization. As Jitka introduced, this is being more and more important. It's going to be very important towards the next programming period. So we need we see that regions and institutions, cross-border institutions, will start collaborating now. So they will be tackling common challenges, working on the different projects. So we also need to identify mechanisms to see if this interaction, cross-border interaction, is generating externalities. It's generating learning. Is it useful? It's not useful. Can we learn more if we only work with our neighbors, or if we work with people from the other side of Europe? So what's happening there? So the fourth group will be discussing this. So as you see, what I was trying to say, it's nothing that it's easy to implement. No one said that it would be easy, and it's a cumulative process that we can be generating. So I think it's something very interesting. I think that the most important thing is that we learn from the whole strategy, and we are able to assess if it's really working in the long run. So not only the instruments and not only the 7 or 10 year period change, but the long-term cultural, understood as innovation, culture mentality of the whole system. So that's my presentation now, and before we will discuss these topics when we go back, we come back from the different tables. And before I give the room to Marcus, who will explain how this is going to work. So I just introduce the thematic scope of these tables that he will these parallel discussions that we will be working with. So one team will discuss the smart specialization process that we discussed, the evolution of the different sectors, domains, and so on. And now 2 groups will discuss, because it's probably more complex, is learning, how we can measure this learning. And a 3rd group, we will be discussing these international collaborations. No? So the idea is just for you to have in mind, I want you to picture this imaginary table. It's not that you need to fill this table. It's like this imaginary table in which you will, when you participate in these parallel discussions, it would be good that you participate proposing some indicators. But when you propose indicators, you must have in mind that they must come with a source of information. So when you propose an idea of we could measure this, okay, but we have information to measure this, and how could we collect this information? And also how we could read this, okay? So if we stick to a very basic indicator from accountability that you all know, so if we want to measure the change in private sector investment for a period, we know where to get funding for, information for innovation scoreboards and so on, and we know how to read it. It's quite clear. Information before, figure after, we can compare. But especially when you discuss all these new indicators that you will be discussing now, of course, it's good to be abstract if you must be, but we also need to think in ways that we can gather information for them. So this is all on my side for now. I will be with you in a while discussing these results for these parallel discussions. And thank you all, and see you in a while.
Yeah, Ricard, thanks for your input. And before we are moving into the so-called breakout rooms or virtual classrooms or virtual meetings, I suggest we have a short break. On my watch, we have it 11:14. So I propose we make a short break till 20 past 11. 20 past 11, and then I will move on and give you a short introduction into how to work in the breakout rooms and how we will split the whole group of the participants into 4 nearly equal groups for working on the topics. And yeah, let's have a short break until 11, let's say 11:25. Then we have a couple of more minutes. 11:25. I will write it in the chat, and 11:25 sharp, I will start with the introduction how to operate in the virtual breakout rooms. So have a nice break. See you soon. Bye bye.